Wicked for Good is out, and given how well Wicked Part 1 was received, and knowing how much weaker Act 2 of the stage play is, which is what these movies are based on, it was always going to be a tall order to make Wicked for Good, well, good. So, how did the movie stack up? Wicked for Good picks up sometime later from where Part 1 left off. Has it been months or years? It's hard to tell, as time is a bit nebulous. Elphaba is in exile on the edges of the land of Oz, flying around on her broomstick and, where she can, defending animals from exploitation, although it seems it has done little good, as the animals are fleeing the land, even her beloved nanny Dulcibert. Her infamy as the Wicked Witch has grown, and it seems that she has kept herself far away from the people she loves, including her sister, that is, until she shows up to ask Nessa Rose to help her, given she is now the governor of Munchkinland following their father's death due to the shock from Elphaba's sudden exile. It is here that she learns about Glinda and Fiero's engagement from Bok, who has been kept in some kind of jealous, coercive servitude to Nessa Rose. When Nessa Rose refuses to help, Elphaba decides to use the wedding day to confront all the wealthy and powerful who will be there to attend. She flies to the Emerald City, reuniting with Glinda for the first time since she left. Glinda, meanwhile, has been appointed as Ambassador of Oz, used as a pawn in a propaganda campaign by the Wizard and Madame Morrible, and, unable to resist the pomp and glory, Glinda has allowed herself to be positioned as the good to Elphaba's terrible reign of evil. When Fiero makes a decision that Glinda has not foreseen, leaving her wedding in ruins, a series of events are unleashed that will threaten not only Elphaba and Glinda's relationship, but will lead to everything changing in Oz for good. So I'll talk high level about my thoughts, and then I'll let you know when we plunge into the spoiler section. Overall, Wicked for Good was good, and overall, I enjoyed it. I may even enjoy it even more upon rewatch, but it did not, unfortunately, live up to the first part. Like I said in the intro, it was always going to be difficult to make part 2 work because it was based on a source material that itself had its flaws. Act 2 of the stage play musical has long been criticised for being weaker. My hope was that given the masterful way part 1 was dealt with, including the welcome additions that were made, there could be tweaks so that part 2 could be much improved, but unfortunately, it didn't quite come together, and more on that in a moment. The grandness and the scope of the film is on par with part 1. There is that attention to detail, the gorgeous sets, the amazing costumes, and the music works beautifully throughout the film. The movie format gives the story so much more depth and nuance than the play could, not only for being twice the runtime due to the movies being split into 2 parts, but also for the intimacy it allows us as a viewer to have, to be able to dive more deeply into the beats and therefore feel so much more for the characters and their story, which means that the movie is in many ways better than Act 2 of the stage play. However, in other ways, the flaws of Act 2 are only made all the more apparent through the filmic medium because there is less suspension of disbelief demanded of us. Of the things I liked, I appreciated Nessa Rose flying, given how ableist it was to have her walk. Glinda's overall arc feels more pronounced and there is more space given to it, which I think served it well. As much as part 1 is about the radicalization of Elphaba to step into her truth, part 2 is about Glinda becoming truly good and not just having the appearance of it. I particularly appreciated the visual motifs that pointed to how deep in the closet Glinda is, like how she is getting ready in her own literal closet for her wedding, and how in the song The Girl in the Bubble she stands at the threshold of her closet as she sings about a question that haunts her, because if she is real with herself, who is she then? I also enjoyed the duet between Elphaba and Fiero. The duet wasn't as well done as Elphaba and Glinda's duet for good, of course, but I can still appreciate it regardless of my personal bias. I even felt like I wanted something more for Elphaba and Fiero, maybe because I wanted it to justify the ending that I don't really buy. I'll talk about that in the spoiler section. Best of all, we got a lot more Gelphie scenes much earlier than in the stage play, and they were poignant, beautiful, and heart-wrenching in all the ways I had hoped. I will, of course, dive further into that in a moment. But first, the elements that didn't work so well for me. Elements that, in all honesty, serve to undercut some of the emotional through line. Perhaps I underestimated how easily the weaknesses of the second act stage play could be fixed, because it turns out simply adding more interactions between Elphie and Glinda and heightening their emotional connection is not enough. In fact, it seemed to merely highlight how the story, as a foundation upon which Gelphie is placed on, is not quite up to the epic scale of that relationship. In broad terms, it feels like portions of the setup from part 1 don't have a satisfying payoff in part 2. Many of the additions don't feel necessary and end up serving more as padding than anything else. I don't think the flashback to Glinda's childhood was needed, as we already understand why she is the way she is. I enjoyed the new songs, although I have a quibble about No Place Like Home that I'll discuss in the spoilers. The additional scenes for Bok would have been fine if he was given an ending, which he is not. His story is just left dangling, making the extra screen time feel unnecessary and not offering up any new information either. I'm not a huge fan of how Dorothy is included. It presupposes a working knowledge of the movie Wizard of Oz, which granted most people know, but still within the context of the movie, it means that there is suddenly this random girl who stole Nessa Rose's shoes heading off somewhere. I understand the idea of keeping her as essentially an off-screen character to mirror the play, but it doesn't work quite as well as it does on stage. There are some logistical issues with how the Scarecrow ends up with Dorothy, but more importantly, I'm not even clear why he joins her given the context. I get why the Tin Man does. He might truly believe that the wizard can help him, but not the Scarecrow. And then the melting scene felt so abstract and odd compared to the emotional devastation of what had just happened between our leading ladies. It's details like that that left me feeling somewhat disorientated. Then there is also the activism element set up in part 1 that ultimately doesn't bear the fruit that I thought it could have. Apart from writing some messages in the sky and then saving a few animals, it doesn't appear that Elphaba's gotten involved in any kind of organised resistance with the animals, which is something I think would have been great to see to give more of a sense of how the animals have been pushing back on the fascist regime, similar to the way Professor Dillerman's song did in part 1. Instead, we see the animals fleeing the land without having seen any of the efforts made to resist. This thread is then resolved at the end of the film in a way that is shallow and overly simple. So when Elphaba approaches the wizard early in the film, telling him the jig is up, that he must tell everyone about his lies, she is not in a position to demand anything of him because she has no leverage. Maybe the intention was to show how impotent she is and that her making demands comes from a place of desperation, but given how she so grandly steps into her truth in defying gravity, it feels like stepping into her truth has merely led her to being lonely without the ability to make any significant changes, despite her being the most powerful witch in all the land and in possession of the Grimoire. I feel like it would have been far stronger to show her at the height of her powers at the start of the film, truly reigning some kind of terror over the land of Oz, so that as she moves through the second act to its conclusion, her character arc has further to go. Now, if these were the only criticisms with the script that I had, then it would have been fine, but there were other issues that let the story down, and I'll go over them in the spoiler section. But let's talk about Gelphie first. We always knew how that was going to go. However, we are, as I mentioned before, given so much more than the stage play ever did. I am delighted. The love they have for each other is palpable throughout. The movie is sapphic yearning in its purest and most traditional form, that is to say, all subtext, but also slapping the sapphics in the face with it. Subtextual enough that I don't doubt I'll get comments telling me I'm delusional for seeing it. Elphaba is straight and she loves only Fiyero. The two ladies are just the best of friends, but the fingerprints of queer storytelling are all over this. I did a review of part 1 and then a video diving into the queerness of the source material. I have them linked if you'd like to watch them. Wicked for Good picks up on the subtext from the first part and continues it beautifully. There is Glinda declaring how she misses Elphaba, clearly hurt that she hasn't come to visit. The way she sings, there's a kind of sort of cost. There's a couple of things get lost, which, given the conversation she and Fiyero had moments before, merely reinforced the idea that she's talking about Elphaba. How Elphaba, upon overhearing Fiyero declare, as the head of the Gal Force unit dedicated to hunting her down, that they must catch this wicked witch, says, "Oh Fiyero, not you too," and then goes on to remember a carefree moment from the university days where she, Glinda, Fiyero, Bok and Nessa Rose are out in the fields, but instead of it centering around her and Fiyero, as you might expect, it's a memory of her and Glinda sitting together, just looking at each other. Then Elphaba ducking her head as if she's blushing, Glinda's arm holding hers, her head on her shoulder like they're a couple. Meanwhile, Fiyero is off to the side. It's also not Fiyero she goes to see when she hears about the upcoming wedding. It's Glinda declaring softly that she just wanted to come and see her. It's Glinda declaring that she can't stand this anymore after throwing herself into Elphaba's arms. It feels like the only reason Elphaba ever so briefly considers joining forces with the wizard, despite how things went down at the end of part 1, is because of course she will if Glinda is asking. And this, I think, is an excellent change to the stage play because now it makes sense why she entertains the idea. She might not trust the wizard, but when it comes to Glinda, she is so easily disarmed. All Glinda has to do is interlace their fingers as they sit on a love seat, suspended in the rafters with thousands of twinkling lights, and look at her with her doe eyes, and pardon the pun, Elphaba melts. All it takes is Glinda sweetly imploring her to imagine all the good they could do together and how together they're unlimited, how together they can change the world, which is actually quite prophetic. They do change Oz between the two of them. They then dance in a room of rainbows with their arms wrapped around each other, and all of this is moments before Glinda is due to walk down the aisle to marry Fiyero. It's also them singing a duet about how they have so deeply and profoundly changed each other that they are imprinted in each other's hearts forever, and then the agonizing pain for both of them that follows as they part. This is next level romantic, made for each other soulmate material. They were roommates after all. Okay, so here is a good point to give a spoiler warning as I dive further in. The love between the women is so strong that even with Fiyero breaking it off with Glinda to leave with Elphaba, it is not enough to sour the Gelphie relationship. Glinda is devastated, and it unwittingly leads to Nessa Rose dying, which is most certainly not Glinda's finest moment, but it also feels understandable. We see her standing in the tattered remnants of her best-laid plans as she sobs in the vast wedding hall, driving home how all alone and friendless she truly is. Of course she's angry. Just to note that it's interesting that her anger seems far more pointed towards Elphaba than Fiyero, who does the actual betrayal. However, she is unable to stay angry for long. The next time she meets Elphaba, they face off, but by the end of the scene, Glinda has forgiven her. We get to see them giving each other a good slap across the face to work their feelings out, maybe not the best way to do it, and then Glinda tackles Elphaba to the ground, in such a gay way, I must add, by screaming at Elphaba to use her hands and then straddling her. If the Gelphie soldiers hadn't appeared, you can't tell me that they wouldn't have ended up hate-kissing. Their beef with each other is so unserious because with Elphaba captured, the ease with which Glinda's anger melts away is quite remarkable. It seems neither woman has the ability to stay angry at the other for long when they are in each other's presence. This is probably why Elphaba stayed away from Glinda for so long because, as we see, the moment she sees her, she is ready to make a deal with the wizard at Glinda's behest. Glinda's willingness to not only acknowledge that Fiyero is genuinely in love with Elphaba, but also being willing to forgive him points to me at least to two things. The feelings she harbors about Fiyero leaving her only highlights her complicated feelings for Elphaba. Her line where she realizes that Fiyero genuinely loves Elphaba is delivered in such a way that makes it feel like she understands exactly how he feels because she loves her too. And it also points to a lack of genuine attraction for Fiyero. As I talked about in my part 1 review, I don't think that she loves him. She hasn't cared to pay close enough attention to the radical change that has happened in him. She doesn't even have the decency to ask him for his hand in marriage before announcing it to the world, which shows a total disregard for his desires. But we know she has the capacity for kindness, empathy, and love because of how we have seen her interact with Elphaba. Her attachment to him is shown to be entirely performative because she wants the grand wedding. She wants what marrying a rich, beautiful prince will afford her, status and popularity. With Fiyero leaving her for Elphaba, her heart is broken, only it's broken by Elphaba and not Fiyero, and it serves as an important turning point in her character arc for the movie. Nowhere is the love between these women more evident than in the titular song For Good, the utterly heartfelt duet of how both women have been changed for good because of the love they have for each other, which is, as Elphaba says, like a handprint on her heart. The fact Glinda kept pressing her hand to her heart throughout the movie did not escape me. It's an outpouring for both women, a tender goodbye culminating in Elphaba pushing Glinda into the closet to protect her, with the two ladies tearfully telling each other, "I love you," which was a delightfully unexpected thing to hear, so heartfelt and emotionally laden. The implications of these words being uttered with Glinda in a literal closet, as the musical score of the song called In the Closet played, is very on the nose. The way they then lean on either side of the closet door was the heart-wrenching emotional climax of the film, unequivocally centering their declaration of love as a centerpiece of the movie, crowned with Elphaba kissing her fingers before pressing them to the door as if to kiss Glinda herself. The last Gelphie moment to touch on is the final moments of the film as Glinda, now standing on the balcony as the ruler of Oz, looks out over her land while Elphaba begins her trek across the desert into exile with Fiyero. They sing a refrain of "For good to each other," uniting them one last time. Then the final shot of the movie is of them from the day in the poppy fields with their friends, Glinda leaning in to whisper something into Elphaba's ear, giving us the iconic image from the poster of the Broadway show, reinforcing what the story is really about. These two women and the way that they have irrevocably changed each other through their love. All in all, it's just as gay as I expected it to be, even if it doesn't end up how I personally feel like it should have, because if there was ever a spot I would have wanted a significant change, it would have been with the ending. It doesn't have to be Elphaba and Glinda ending up together romantically, although I think that this is what the story really calls for thematically. The story essentially hinges on the power that these two women together create, and we've been told unequivocally that the two of them together makes them unlimited. Powerful enough that Glinda, fueled by her love for Elphaba and the grief of her loss, finds the strength to finally be Glinda the Good and take Oz back from the wizard and Madame Morrible. Without Elphaba, Glinda would not have had the strength to do so, and on her own, Elphaba couldn't do it either. As a litmus test, if either of them had been a man, there would not have been a single question about making this romantic. And what's more, it would have been held up as the most epic of love stories, on par with Rose and Jack from the Titanic, which, as we know, is visually referenced in the movie. But I can also get behind a powerful female friendship. I don't think that that is what is telegraphed through the two movies, not when they have exhilarating, face-flushing feelings for each other that has them declaring they'll loathe each other their whole life long, that it's Elphaba's heart's desire to have Glinda come with her to go and see the wizard, or how she asks Glinda to fly away with her at the end of part 1. But Elphaba ends up with Fiyero, and while there is some lovely chemistry between them, in my personal opinion, it pales in contrast to Elphaba and Glinda. I do get it. Fiyero was able to meet Elphaba's needs. He was primed for the radical change that being with Elphaba required. Glinda took a little too long to find the strength in herself to break away from her comfortable, privileged life. It took losing Elphaba and everyone else too to force her to do what she needed to. It required total emotional devastation to break her open. But it seems wrong to me that despite her finally popping her own bubble, which took so much courage, she is left totally alone with the weight of an entire country to run, believing Elphie to be dead when she isn't. It seems so cruel and also totally unnecessary. It also means that the lesbian-coded character once again gets her unhappy ending, all alone, stuck in her tower, deprived of her love. For me to accept this outcome, the movie needed to do more to convince me that this was genuinely the only way to go. If having them together and in love by the end of the film was not an option, then I would have at least wanted to see Elphaba and Fiyero joining Glinda in ruling Oz. That is the change I think could have been made. Elphaba says that Glinda can never know that they're still alive, and my reaction is why? Why can't she know? What will happen then? The wizard is gone, Madame Morrible is gone, Glinda has made it so that the animals are coming back, accepted as valued members of Oz society once again, so there is nothing keeping either Elphaba or Fiyero away since Glinda is now the de facto ruler. In the original book, she does ultimately instate the true ruler of Oz, Ozma, but in the meantime, before she retires to her court of 100 of the most beautiful women in Oz with her army of women, she surely would have benefited from Elphaba helping her, and as she said in the film, it wouldn't be a big push to rehabilitate Elphaba's image with Ozians. Quite besides how awful it is for Elphaba to let Glinda believe she is dead, it also gives us an Elphaba who is choosing to leave behind her beloved Oz, which, let me point out, she has an entire song about how there is no place like home and that she should be fighting for it. But here she is, abandoning it. Through the second act, she does have something of a villainous arc where she decides she may as well be the evil witch everyone thinks her to be. But we know that that's not true. She isn't truly evil. I certainly don't buy that the emotional turmoil that leads to her casting the spell that changes Fiyero into a scarecrow is enough for her to give up on Oz entirely, certainly not on Glinda entirely. She isn't even the person who orchestrated this departure. It was Fiyero, which is the second time he saves her in the movie, rather than her saving herself, and I don't like it. As a side note, I don't get why Fiyero had to stay behind and be captured and then be turned into a scarecrow when Elphaba had a broomstick, and even if he couldn't jump on behind her, Okay, so I'm just thinking about how epic it would have been to have Elphaba and Glinda riding on a broomstick together. But there were also a number of flying monkeys that could have easily picked him up and flown him to safety. So even him turning into a scarecrow makes no sense to me. But it happens because he decides to save her when I feel like she could have done it herself anyway. All of this is then compounded with the underwhelming resolution. Sure, the wizard finds out that Elphaba is his daughter, and it does seem to break something in him, which means that when Glinda tells him to leave, he does. It did feel a little easy though. Same goes with how Madame Morrible was suddenly so afraid of Glinda when in their previous scene she was threatening Glinda. Why does she assume that Glinda has any more power than she did before? Why does she put up no resistance when she has actual magic to call on and Glinda doesn't? It felt overall unsatisfying. I think that all of this could have been sorted out with a few extra shots of Glinda and the flying monkeys working together, the wizard and Madame Morrible clocking the shift to make these beats work, but the absence of them when combined with Elphaba and Fiyero heading into exile when they didn't need to, it ultimately makes for an underwhelming and unnecessarily sad ending. It just felt like all the promising setup from part 1 that seemed to be saying something pretty profound about embracing otherness, changing the self to change the world, and how love, empathy and kindness is the true key to overcoming the darkness of the world, didn't quite manage to take a nuanced and complex build-up to a truly satisfying conclusion, even undercutting it by having Elphaba abandon the land she had been so determined to help. In the end, both women lost everything, and most especially, they lost each other. How did you feel about Wicked for Good? I'd love to hear your opinions. I want to shout out my Patreon and membership members who help me make content, and if you want to get exclusive videos and more, see the link in my description to join. Until next time, lady lovers.